This Cosmos in Collision, which he co-authored with Troy McLaughlin. They are catastrophists, and we call him Dinosaur Ted Holden in our little in-group there at EU, which is Electric Universe. Thunderbolts.info crowd puts on a leading cutting-edge scientific conference where you will meet many enlightened and dear people. So please come. Do you know where it is this year, Ted?
The conference this year is in Phoenix.
Hot diggity. Now, I was just asking Ted before we went on air about UFOs, because it seems to be the topic of the day elsewhere, such as Gordon White's Ruin Soup, and also one of Ted's Ganymede Hypothesis Facebook group members and a mutual friend on Facebook, Jill, who we've invited to join this conversation, but she may not be around. So, Ted, talk to me a little bit about UFOs.
Okay, I mean, you've got like 3 or 4 possible starting points with that. You've got a lot of bright people that believe in UFOs. You know, I can't be certain of it, but I believe that David Talbot believes that UFOs are real. You know, you've got other people whose opinions you would have to respect who believe that this stuff is real. I mean, there's...
Look, Ted, I think it's beyond any question that the only thing that makes people say that UFO and alien abduction and all the related phenomenon is not real is simply their belief system, which is false skepticism.
Okay, let me run a few of the other starting points for this thing by. Okay, it's like, you know, the book that Troy McLaughlin and I wrote relies heavily on Occam's principle, the principle that says that when you have, you know, 2 theories of equal explanatory power, you generally go with the simpler of the 2, right? One of the ways which I interpret that says that whenever you have any kind of a question of any sort of a thing involving people coming to our own solar system from some other solar system, that is, across honest cosmic distances, versus believing that you might have, you know, travel, you know, particularly in past ages, you know, within our own system, that you have to go with the idea of travel within our own system, right? It's very much simpler. The distances are, you know, many orders of magnitude lesser. Now, if you were to scale our system to be a yard in diameter, okay, that is, make the diameter of Pluto's orbit something like 1 yard, then at that scale, the nearest other star is going to be 4 miles away, right? So I mean, that's the difference in distances between, you know, within our own system, and cosmic distances between other stars. They say that the distance between our sun and Alpha Centauri is typical of the Milky Way, that even in bright clusters in the Milky Way, that's more or less the normal distance between 2 main sequence stars. Okay, so that, you know, any kind of a wish to believe that we may have ever been visited by people from other stars has to be a last resort. Okay, if no other explanation is available, then maybe you go to that one. You understand what I'm saying? Now, there's another question which says that you've got this movie, Avatar, right, which shows people going 4 light years away to Proxima Centauri or Alpha Centauri for something which they call unobtainium, right, which is some kind of a mineral which can only be mined in this one place. That to me is not believable. In other words, there's absolutely...
They stole that from Rocky and Bullwinkle, by the way. It was Upsidasium.
Right. Right. At any rate, you know, I don't believe there's anything which you could...
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, well, Ted,
I'm sorry?
I would like to say that from Okay, so the first thing you said was that you're interested in logical parsimony. In other words,
Mhm.
Occam's razor.
Right. There's another thing which says that I have a very hard time believing that there's anything physical which you could bring back from another star or the neighborhood of another star which would justify the expense of the effort. Right. I think anything which you would want from another star, would have to be easier and simpler and vastly cheaper to figure out how to produce and manufacture here than would be to go to some other star to try to get something else, right? So that the only thing that I would want from another star, at least in theory, would be information, right? Somebody in Alpha Centauri knows how to make a better toilet than we know how to make a better tennis racket, a better skeet gun, or whatever it is, right? You would like to be able to get that information without having to travel there.
Right.
And I believe that this is something which you can get some sort of a mental feel for by reading ancient history, right? And by studying this Old Kingdom Egyptian notion of Ka and the possibility of that, which that provides, of projecting human consciousness into remote parts of the universe to try to pick up that kind of information. I believe that that may have been being done in past ages.
Otherwise known as a magical worldview.
Otherwise known as the antediluvian communication system, which, according to ancient literature from various countries, seems to indicate that you have a capability of telepathic communication amongst not only humans but higher animals as well. Plato's dialogue, The Statesman, goes into that in some detail. Right now, you see traces of that in Genesis, where you have the snake talking to the woman, with no effort made to try to explain that or say anything about it. In other words, the book Genesis is written as if everybody in the world knows that snakes can talk to women, right? Now, obviously, you're not going to teach a snake to speak German or Russian or English, right? But, if you're talking about a telepathic communication system, then why not, right? In other words, that is what ancient literature seems to indicate. The idea of religion, right? There's nothing which we would call religion prior to the flood and the Tower of Babel, right? I mean, the words priest and prophet, the two most major things that you find in religions, don't appear prior to the flood in Genesis, right? Or prior to the fall of the Tower of Babel, right? So that, what we call religion, or at least what you would have called religious practices, anywhere from the end of Genesis until, the end of the books of Moses, basically involves practices intended to communicate with God and with spirits as if that was a difficult thing to do, right? Whereas Genesis reads as if that wasn't difficult, right? God and spirits speak to humans directly in Genesis, so that you don't have priests or prophets, so that the indications are that this antediluvian communication system included speaking with spirits, right? And if you can speak with pure spirits, then what reason could there be to not think that you might be able to communicate across cosmic distances and ask somebody about making a better toilet or a better tennis racket than we have? If somebody in Alpha Centauri or living in the neighborhood of Alpha Centauri does have something like that. You see what I mean? That would have to be cheaper than trying to build a rocket ship to go that far out and come back.
Yes.
Now,
If you may allow me to point something out, you are working in a very kind of wanting to be rational and parsimonious, but you're taking a long way around. You're going all the way outside of the only ontological primitive that you have, which is that reality appears in your conscious awareness. So let's say, for example, that all you were was an ear, that you were just an ear floating in space, and you could hear a tone. Well, as an ear, with everything you could observe, right, and your whole world was just that tone, like a guitar string, you could say, oh, well, scientifically, I have to drop the tools because this goes below the level of measurement, and say the ontological or the cosmic primitive is guitar string.
Right. Let me tell the other. I said there were 3 or 4.
I mean, is hearing. You can't go below that. You could say there's a sound, but you can't say
Right.
where it's coming from. If you
Let me
postulate a guitar string, if you're postulating an external physical reality. Hold on, Ted. I want you to pick this up because it's very important. This is from a computer scientist engineer like yourself, Bernardo Castro, who worked at CERN on some of the serious machine intelligence or machine learning problems and whatnot. And he's a philosopher also. So you're saying that to get through physical space, you just treat it as a non-physical space, essentially, by tuning yourself in with your conscious awareness. Well, I'm saying that you could drop all that physical space and not even have to. We should unlearn the belief in a physical reality, and then death will definitely become something to us which is not something that, in other words, we will be able to talk to the dead. We will be able to see the etheric plane. We will be able to understand better our formative thought, which is symbols which point to things that transcend our ability to understand from a physical understanding. Am I making sense to you?
Yeah. Okay. Look, Jack. I said there were a couple of other ways of looking at this. Let me run the last one by. But you with me? It's like,
oh yeah, please go.
Okay, we've got these images coming back from the MSL rover on Mars, right? Which for the last, been there since 2012, since July or thereabouts of 2012, been close to 5 years. And you've got images of not only indigenous people, you've got images of living creatures on Mars, right? And it's like, and Troy doesn't believe, or Troy has a much harder time with this than I do. I'm willing to believe my own eyes and figure that, like, what we believe we know about oxygen on Mars is simply not, there's some part of this information is missing, right? It's like it's something we don't know about the place. You've got that ground squirrel that I showed you the picture of, right? It's like you've got, I've been looking at hundreds and thousands of these images now for the last, 4 or 5 years.
But you
Okay.
do okay. Now, effectively, hold on. We have to dissect this first step first, which is your persistent and indefatigable insistence on a material reality, which is invalid rationally and scientifically even. And here's why. You're going based on what appear to you to be self-evident clues. One, no one has volitional control over the physical laws of the shared world of objects, okay, the shared arena where we all appear as physical beings, and there are physical things, right? And those things seem to persist outside, beyond our volitional control as individual conscious entities. In other words, even though the only place that reality can appear is via the vehicle of the mind of an individual personal self, we don't have volitional control over that reality. So that's one thing that makes it look like there's a self-evident material reality. There's just a correlation there. Now, your brain, if you go and mess with the brain, pardon my language, you will utterly mess with people's reality. This is well known, right? The behaviorists and all the other mad scientists poking at people's brains and doing lobotomies. We know you can completely change reality by messing with the brain. That is a correlative, however you say that, and not a causation. That's the second thing that would probably make it appear that there must be a physical reality, even though we do not. You don't have to go outside of consciousness to find that ontological primitive, which somehow manages to hit some threshold of complexity where consciousness arises as epiphenomenological, consequence. You end up trapped by your own logic, because panpsychism is the ultimate necessity of a reductionist material worldview. Am I making sense to you here?
Sort of. Now, look, Jack, it's like you'd asked me about UFOs, whether I believed them, and I was going to try to answer the question. It's
Well,
like,
no, I mean, you're in the right place, Ted, but what you're doing is you're treating our belief in a material world. Now, we know that our personal selves are going to die and pass out of this so-called final physical world. And yet, and yet, none of us seem to be too keen on the idea that it may just be a world of appearances, right? The physical is something that we co-created in order to have a good place to learn to become real entities. In other words, to learn and grow up and become more transcendent, more refined, more, I guess.
okay, well, Jack, let me go on with what I was going to tell you. It's like, you've got the physical world here, or at least our perception of it. And in the physical world, right, it's like we actually have like either NASA or United States Air Force employees on Mars. They're showing these MSL images. You've got the one guy who's obviously some kind of a mechanic working on the rover, right, or at least cleaning the camera lenses. I mean, that thing's not going to function without somebody up there to clean and just maintenance, right? It's like there's no vehicle which could roll around Baltimore for 3 years without maintenance, and certainly nothing's going to roll around Mars for 5 years without maintenance. Okay, so we know that we've got, like, either USAF or NASA employees on Mars. We know that you've got small animals and you've got indigenous people on Mars, right? And it's almost impossible for me to believe that humans could survive a 1.5-year trip to Mars via anything which is powered by rockets. So you have this question of, like, aside from rockets, what other way could there be to get to Mars, right? And the answer to that, as near as I can tell from conversations that I've had with people who seem to have the connections to answer those kinds of questions, seems to involve what you call Biefeld-Brown propulsion, which does not involve rockets. Okay, that is said to be also part of the propulsion system for the B-2 bomber. Okay, the B-2 bomber, from what I read, uses ordinary jet engines to get to altitude. But once it's at altitude, it has no further requirement for fuel. The only reason you'd have to come back would be for food, right? Now, the people I've spoken to and carried on conversations with about Biefeld-Brown propulsion have made a number of claims which I have no way of vetting, right? I have no way of checking up on this stuff. This is beyond any knowledge of physics that I have. It's beyond any political power that I have to try to determine whether these stories are real. All I can do is tell you what I've heard. Okay, they tell, and like I say, you've got the fact that you've got these people on Mars, and then it's highly unlikely that they could have survived a 1.5-year trip. They tell me that the Biefeld-Brown propulsion system could get you from here to Mars like in a much shorter space of time than like 1.5 or 2 years. It might be a month or a month and a half or something like that. That's all you'd be talking about at the most, right? There's also a question of radiation and the Van Allen belts and just solar radiation between here and Mars, right? And they also tell me that, like, the Biefeld-Brown propulsion system would eliminate not only worries about radiation, but also worries about encountering space dust or anything like that. And if you start flying at speeds which are any meaningful fraction of the speed of light, then even dust could destroy a space vehicle. I mean, unless there was something to deal with the dust, right? And they tell me that, I've had a couple of them tell me that, like, interstellar travel has already been done. Okay, that is, trips to Alpha Centauri has already been done by humans, right? And they tell me that, they have made contact with other groups of people in deep space. Now, how much of that is believable, how much of it's a fairy tale, I have no idea, right? But if you're going to talk about UFOs, then that's probably what you should be talking about, just possibilities of things like that.
Well, hang on. I want to bring in part of imaginary solutions, or imaginative solutions.
Uganda not sounding good, Jack. What's happening?
I don't know.
Okay, now you sound, okay, your voice was garbled just for a moment there. It's okay now.
Okay, now he suggests as a thought experiment that the reason why UFOs are so evanescent, are so confounding and unrepeatable and just otherwise just completely weird, is because the entities that are the aliens don't have to be born into a physical body in order to, and they're like tourists who are coming to visit inside consciousness, but not all the way down here in the physical
You're
muck.
describing Ka. You're describing what the Egyptians call
Yes,
Ka.
exactly. Very good.
Now look, it's like I've written 2 articles which appear in the files section of that Ganymede hypothesis group on Facebook, right? There's a short and a long version of that. The short version is called Telepathic Age. The long version is called Information Flow, right? And the long version talks about Ka and talks about the kinds of things which Egyptians were describing, okay? And what Ka was supposed to be able to do when they were describing these things, when you're reading these things on the walls of the pyramids right now. There are some very interesting similarities between
No. I'm going further than that. I'm suggesting that the entities, the aliens, they are completely from the world of mind.
No.
And they hold on.
Their Ka would be completely from the realm of mind. Okay, it's like this is what the Egyptians said. They said that when a human being is created, that the human being is created along with this Ka, with this thing which is normally translated as a double, which is like a spiritual rendition of the same person, right? So that a person is going to have a physical basis as well as a spiritual double or connected entity, which can project itself to all corners everywhere, right? The spirit, the Ka is not limited by physical reality, right? Now, this is entirely similar to the stories that you read about people being heard from after they died in the Bible, right? And there's about a baker's half dozen of those kinds of stories in the Bible, 3 of which stick in people's minds.
Yes, well, Ted,
Yeah.
Does mind appear in brain, or does brain appear in mind?
Good question.
One has to precede the other, doesn't it? With causality, doesn't one have to precede the other?
You would think.
What makes the aliens invisible to us and so confusing is our presupposition that goes down to the very root of our belief. It's something we're inculcated into, right? Our mothers have telepathic connections to us. That's a well-established kind of anecdotal and probably scientific fact. And yet, culturally, they're dissuaded or even discouraged from maintaining their telepathic maternal connection to their children after the baby comes out, or even before while the baby's still inside, for goodness sake. And so I'm saying that Ka, the reason it's so much more efficient is because it's a lot closer to the very core of reality.
Right. You've got images on the sides of the pyramid walls which show this god Khnum, right, who is supposed to create humans. And it shows a spinning wheel, not a spinning wheel, like a potter's wheel, where Khnum is creating a person and the person's Ka at the same time, right? And the Ka figure in these images often has one finger pointing to his mouth, meaning that he is what Julian Jaynes would call a voice phenomena, right, or a bicameral phenomenon. And, it's a very complicated sort of a thing right now. Like, where do we even go with that? Jeez.
I'd say.
Remember, I said that there were analogs to this thing to be found in the Bible, right? In these stories of people being seen after they died, and you've got like what I consider to be three things in common with all those stories. The three most common of those stories are the story of Jesus' own resurrection, the story of Lazarus, and the story of Saul and Samuel and the witch of Endor. Right? And all of those stories, you've got things in common, right? It's like, first, the effect was temporary. I mean,
you've got Jehovah saying, "Don't you dare pick up that phone, or I'll have all the other Christians kill you."
yeah, no, but I'm saying that, like, the effect was temporary. I mean, Jesus was seen for about 40 days after he came back, and then he had to leave. You know, Lazarus was seen for 2 or 3 weeks, and there's no claim of anybody sticking around and living for another 30 years after they'd come back like that, right? So that's
no, wait. I believe in the Gospel of Philip, which was found in Ganymede. Jesus stayed 12 years. It might not be the Gospel of Philip, but it might be. Jesus stayed for 12 years teaching the first mystery to the disciples. So just enough for them to get a handle on their own being. He had to stick around for 12 years and teach them after he resurrected.
Right. The normal version of the story says 40 days. At any rate, you've got the fact that they were temporary, the fact that these events were all seen by enough people that they can't simply be brushed off is another trait in common. Now, the interesting trait in common when you get to this question of Ka says that there's no possibility that Jesus or anybody else ever came back in a real dead physical human body, right? If you want dead bodies walking around, the religion you need is voodoo, not Christianity. Okay, but to the people that experienced these things, what they experienced was absolutely indistinguishable from what you would anticipate if somebody really did come back in a dead physical body, right? Now, Jesus even had nail holes in his hands, and this Thomas was able to actually touch his hands and poke his finger through the nail holes, and the guy was just absolutely, fractured, right? I mean, the experience was every bit as real as if there stood Jesus in his body after he'd been crucified with the nail holes still in his hands. Do you see what I'm saying? So
sure.
This is exactly what the Egyptians were talking about with Ka, right? So that if you really want to talk about, somebody from another star system coming here to visit without anything, without any physical, or what's the word I want, without anything physical.
No, actually, that's what Morpheus called your residual self-image in the Matrix.
If you want to talk about aliens coming here, and it not being physical, I think that's what you need to be talking about.
Well, okay. So let's go back to Jesus and the fact that he miraculously did stuff that was under his volitional control and violated the laws of the so-called physical world, or so-called physical laws of this world. Now, Dean Radin says as soon as you've got robots that can think, they will not make the mistake of presupposing an existent physical reality outside of what their perceptual data and observational parenthetical parsing of the information gives them. And they'll be able to levitate, they'll have telepathy, they'll have all kinds of psionic powers like psychokinesis and stuff. And these robots will become our robot overlord wizards instantly because they won't be hampered the way animals are, the way people are, by being born into the physical world. Make sense?
I was looking for a sign of Jill Holland ever showing up. It's like, I don't.
No, we don't want to go on and on forever and bore everybody, but Dean Radin really did say something to that effect. That's what I was trying to tell her in the message. She said something similar, and I'll wait until she does join us so she can make her point. I'll come and get you when I can finally track her down. But do you see what I'm saying here is that the robots would be able to pull a Jesus, so to speak, and do magic, which is, in other words, have volitional control over what they should not be able to control, like telekinesis, telepathy, levitation, I don't know, astral projection, physical flight. you know, summoning fire. How about shape shifting? How about some voodoo, killing people? Power word kill.
Did you ever see that? You've seen the thing which shows Bob Hope and the voodoo doctor.
Bob Hope with the who?
Bob Hope and the doctor. He's been asked about voodoo and zombies.
You're breaking up a little. Let me mute my mic and you tell me about it.
Let me show it to you. It's like, you go to YouTube, right?
Yeah, don't forget to share your screen. You should be able to share your screen with the green button.
Give me a second.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'm going to say we have not been well served by the tyranny of science telling us that the evidence of our own awareness, of our own ipseity, to quote Edward Pandemonium, and sapience, of our own...
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can.
See if you can.
Let me make, yes.
See if you can hear this.
There we go.
I don't know if the sound's going to come through. This is Bob Hope, right?
You live here? Yes. Maybe you know where Nabi is. When a person dies and is buried, seems a certain voodoo priest who have the power to bring him back to life. It's worse than horrible because a zombie has no will of his own. You see them sometimes walking around blindly with dead eyes, following orders, not knowing what they do, not caring. You mean like Democrats?
That's an oldie but a goodie. Of course, he's talking about. I was just listening to Thus Spoke Zarathustra today, and Nietzsche had a few incisive words about the state and its ability to.
Nietzsche was a bright guy.
It's the way it subsumes individuality and causes us to become carried away with a group narrative. I don't know. I'm not saying this is what Nietzsche said, but he was throwing other invective at the concept of the state, saying that it was born of individual cultures or tribes and so forth. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with talking about something that I haven't examined closely enough to expound on. I not that I should expound anyway, but yeah, Nietzsche. I finally got onto Nietzsche, Ted, and it finally landed, and it was very very deep. And I look forward to going back to it again and again.
Okay, Nietzsche, to my thinking, never made any sort of logical errors. Logic was always perfectly good. It's like his starting assumptions were simply wrong in some cases.
Wow.
That's what I come up with. It's like, I don't believe that God is dead. I don't believe in atheism or evolutionism or anything like that, right? I mean,
well, he was speaking about effectively dead. God is effectively dead if you're going to act like nothing under, there's no fundamental foundation of transcendent principle or belief on which our other actions, decisions, and lives, society, and so forth are constructed. If you take those things out, if you take out God, you take away God, and suddenly you've got crime and punishment, right? Is that Dostoevsky?
Yeah.
Where the guy goes and he kills the ant because it's just like the best thing for everyone. It turns out to be his conscience that he can't escape from.
I've never read it.
I've never read it either, but I heard Jordan Peter Jordanson. Gosh, I'm a little dull tonight. I apologize.
Yeah.
Dr. Peter P. Jordanson. I've been watching a ton of his lectures on the maps and meaning. I posted them. Gosh, I hope I'm saying his name right.
No, what I'd
But anyway,
was that the guy killed somebody just for the experience, right? Just to see what it would feel like.
No. He did. He had all sorts of people. Like he had a sister who was going to marry this guy who apparently was just not going to treat her well. He had like a sick mother, or I can't remember the specifics, but he had many other people that would benefit, and so he spends a great deal of the book, so I'm told, struggling with his decision to do it, and also how to do it or whatever. I guess the unfolding of the opportunity. But what Dostoevsky and Nietzsche were saying that was identical was he was acting as if the moral consequences or the definite, okay, you're not a zombie if you have a conscience, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that my opinion means anything or that I'm even conscious or that I exist at all. I could just be this persona that is glommed onto my more fundamental being, or I could not be anything other than false self. But, let's still go ahead and behave as if I'm real.
Jack, this whole
and that we're interacting.
the conference call, or is like, I haven't heard anything from him.
Come again?
Does Honky want to get in on the conference call? I haven't heard anything from him.
Mr. Honky? Hello, Mr. Honky? Mr. Honky? He woke up and passed gas. I gave him some deli tuna earlier. I think the pickles in it or whatever gave him a little stomach gas. Or he may just not be well. He's been a little bit down. I'm worried that some Dostoevsky types, some fucking God is dead types might want to get Honky out of the picture because it would be more convenient and would remove one more obstacle to my being gotten rid of in the situation that goes on and on here at Eddie's house.
Yeah, I would say ice cream maybe, but not pickles. I can't see giving a cat a pickle.
Oh, it was just a deli. It's a pre-mixed, star-kissed tuna salad. He likes it. It tastes like cat food. It tastes like shit. And he likes it. He's like, oh, man, this tastes like cat food. I'm like, that is cat food, Honky.
Jack, have you ever watched any of these YouTube videos which show lions killing buffaloes?
You had me thinking about that. As I was walking the other day, I saw a large moth down in the street in the gutter. It was fluttering away and the sun was up and just getting high. And I thought, oh, man, I should step on that moth and take it out of its suffering. And then I realized, holy crap, I'm projecting my subjective final reality of, a suffering, pessimistic worldview onto that poor moth. For all I know, I left him alone because for all I know, that moth was in the absolute ends of ecstasy that any being will ever exist and will ever experience of all beings of all time. So I didn't step on the moth. I had no way of judging whether or not that moth was in fact suffering other than my own bias.
I don't really hold humans that far above or that far above the other animals, right? But I'll say one thing. Humans have some limited capacity to feel sorry for the animals that we eat, right? For lions, not even the tiniest bit.
Oh, no. So I thought about the cave boars, and I thought, something? Ted may be projecting him when he's watching the ordeal, but for all you know, the hottest, most erotic, most satisfying thing that could ever happen to a cave boar is a long, slow death by lion. You just don't know what's going on in the mind and feelings of that boar. And also, pain becomes very indistinguishable from pleasure at certain thresholds. I understand, if I'm not wrong. I'm sure that the brain pokers and the psycho scientists who like to dissect and vivisect could tell you a lot better than I. But
No. That's like, I mean, nothing enjoys being tortured to death. And I'm sorry. It's like, there's some of these things that show lions killing cave buffalo are just unbelievably brutal. I mean,
okay, right. It's not wrong to say that we're probably those cave boars are experiencing some level of discomfort, but we don't know that for certain.
yeah, I don't know about cave boars, right? But it's like you get the warthogs out there in the savannas in Africa, which are, a warthog is a little bit more than a snack and a little bit less than a meal to include 3 or 4 lions right now. Sometimes I get the impression the male lions just like to hear warthogs squeal. I mean,
I think it's very important that you do maintain the force of your beliefs, and that is good, gives you a solid foundation. I'm in a bit more of a kind of a in-between state.
You see, it's like I can understand the lions and buffaloes hating each other, right? And it's like, every lion that ever reaches adulthood has seen lion cubs killed by buffaloes, right? So there's no love lost. But I don't think there's anything similar to that with warthogs. I don't think there's any kind of a case of a warthog killing lion cubs. And it's a very rare instance that a warthog gets enough of a tusk into a lion to do any real harm to the lion.
What about Honky's reality, though, Ted?
I'm sorry?
What kind of world does Honky live in?
Geez, I don't know. He's got to be close to the prize for the oldest cat on the planet right now.
Well, he is kind of old. He's getting old, but more importantly, he's I think evidence of a loving over soul, because he's kind of a bodhisattva. Companion animals in general, and the fact that they exist.
He's a nice cat.
Yeah, well, whether they came about because of some sort of adaptation or not, or at least a hopeful sign. And that's the great thing about Nietzsche, is he started explaining to me why I could let go of the total pessimism of Schopenhauer and move on to actually find a new hope.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it's hopeless, man. It is hopeless. Give hope up. Just surrender your hope. There is no hope. Hope is a fool's hope. But no. Apparently, the Ubermensch will have hope.
Right. I don't know about the Ubermensch. I mean, Nietzsche was talking about glorifying things which come naturally to humans, which Jesus wanted to really get rid of.
Well, you may be thinking of distortions used by the Third Reich or whatever, but go ahead and expound on that.
Right. Listen, I don't think there's any chance that Jill Hollett's not going to join us tonight, Jack.
I didn't realize that you were holding so much expectation. I gave up on her long ago when she didn't respond to my instant message. Let me see if she's responded yet. Most likely, or she's ignoring me, or she's feeling ignored.
No,
let me go to her post.
Then just went off to bed or something. It's like, I'll catch up with her later.
I'll read her post to you, which is quite good. Let me go and read her post to you that I didn't get a chance. I've made 2 lovely paragraphs, and then I tried yet again. Here it is. I posted a UFOs and excellent Gordon White and Magic and Paranormal podcast, and also germane to the John Keel and Carl Jung examination conversation we started. And then I posted the brand new podcast from Rune Soup, R-U-N-E Soup, which is a very clever name, by the way. And Jill wrote back, I might listen to this at some point, ... But I think what I think is that there is not a world that is parallel to ours. It is a world that is perpendicular at right angles to ours. It is right here with us, occupying the same space as we do, but it is at right angles to us, so to speak. Normally, we cannot perceive this perpendicular world unless the electromagnetic conditions are right. I think it's a very sensible kind of argument. But when the conditions are right, the world aligns somewhat with ours, so to speak, and we can perceive that world somewhat for brief periods of time. There is a lot more to it than that, of course. UFOs seem to be bodiless, inorganic intelligences that can navigate between our world and their world at will, but I do not believe they are extraterrestrial at all. I think that UFOs originate right here on Earth. I normally do not listen to interviews and podcasts because I usually find them to be much too long and terribly tedious. But I might give this one a try, maybe tomorrow. Let me just write her back here. Jill wrote you a long response that, whoops, the archons erased in in the ether, if you get me. Oh, wait. Then Ted, then Ted showed up. And Ted showed up 2 hours earlier than, whoops, I expected. Apparently, the sun rises in the east.
Right.
I really
Listen, I've got a couple other things I need to get doing. Let me let you go here, and I'll catch up with you later.
Oh, hang on. I just don't want her to feel.
Don't worry. She's not.
No, hold on. She look. We talked earlier today about her coming on a podcast. Let me just write this sentence, and then you and I'll wrap up. Apparently, the sun. You're the one who brought her up. Apparently, the sun rises in the east.
Yeah.
In the east, and Ted is in Texas. And Ted's. What do you want me to add here? Any message from you?
No, just I'll catch up with you later.
9 Central CMT. Central. What is it called? What is your time called? Central
Time.
CMT? How do you abbreviate it?
Just CT.
Okay, 9 CT is. Oh wait, I mean 10 CT. Oh, it is getting late for you, isn't it? 10
Yep.
CT is 9 MT. Is 9 MT. I'm on JT.
Right. Okay.
I was really enjoying our conversation. I think it was a rather stimulating one.
Yeah, I hopefully look. It's like that part 3 of that thing about gravity will be up on Thunderbolts here shortly. A few days. Okay, that's what I get from Stuart Talbot. He was happy with it.
Yes, tell me just a little bit about that. You've got Brian Talbot interacting with you in a way that you think is productive, or that is productive.
Stuart Talbot. Okay.
Who?
There's going to be an interesting conference here in August. It's like, oh, I look forward to it. But Jack, I got to go here. It's like I need to leave.
Well, let's do a part 2. You always very precipitously and very curtly always want to end conversations, and I respect that. So we're going to say goodnight to Theodore Holden, and we'll try and do this again tomorrow and get Jill to join us.
Okay.
And anybody who happens to listen to this podcast in the future, well, we love you, or maybe we hate you, or maybe we just don't have any feelings about you at all. But thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Take care.
Good night, Ted.
Bye.